Welcome, everybody, to the A.I.P channel where anything is possible. Tonight, we're going to talk about one of the most intriguing chapters of the Cold War history, Operation Mongoose. This was a secret program orchestrated by the United States government, primarily through the Central Intelligence Agency, aimed at destabilizing and ultimately overthrowing the regime of Fidel Castro in Cuba. Launched in the aftermath of the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, Operation Mongoose represented the Kennedy administration's determination to eliminate what they perceived as a communist threat just 90 miles from American shores. To set the stage, let's recall the historical context. The Cuban Revolution of 1959, led by Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, and others, toppled the U.S.-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista. Castro's government quickly aligned with the Soviet Union, nationalizing American-owned properties and implementing socialist reforms. This alarmed the United States, which feared the spread of communism in the Western Hemisphere. The Eisenhower administration had already been planning covert actions against Castro, including assassination attempts through partnerships with organized crime figures who had lost their lucrative casinos in Havana. However, it was under President John F. Kennedy that those efforts intensified. The Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 was a humiliating failure for the U.S. CIA-trained Cuban exiles landed on the island's southern coast, expecting to spark a popular uprising. Instead, they were swiftly defeated by Castro's forces. With over 1,100 captured and the rest killed or fleeing, Kennedy, embarrassed on the world stage, vowed to learn from his mistake, but doubled down on anti-Castro efforts. In November 1961, he authorized Operation Mongoose, also known as the Cuban Project. The operation goal was clear: to help the Cubans overthrow the communist regime within Cuba and institute a new government which the United States can live in peace. Leading the charge was Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, the president's brother, who oversaw the Special Group, or SGA. This interagency committee included high-level officials like CIA Director John McCone, Secretary of State Dean Russ, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, and National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy. The additional head was Brigadier General Edward Lansdale, a legendary figure in unconventional warfare, known for his role in the Philippines against the Huk rebels. Lansdale brought a flair for the psychological operations and sabotage to the project. The CIA's William Harvey, a tough-as-nails operative, handled many of the dirtier aspects, including assassination plots. Operation Mongoose was divided into phases, with Phase 1 focusing on intelligence gathering, propaganda, and initial sabotage. The U.S. allocated significant resources, up to $50 million annually, and involved hundreds of agents. CIA stations in Miami became hubs for recruiting Cuban exiles, dissidents, and refugees. These assets were trained in guerrilla tactics, infiltration, and demolition at secret bases in Florida and elsewhere. One key element was psychological warfare. The CIA broadcast anti-Castro propaganda via Radio Swan and later Voice of America, dropping leaflets over Cuba to incite discontent. They spread rumors of Castro's impending downfall, exaggerated economic hardships, and highlighted defections. In May of '62, during Cuba's May Day celebrations, Mongoose operatives attempted to counter communist propaganda by distributing materials that portrayed Castro as a Soviet puppet. Sabotage operations were ramped up. Teams infiltrated Cuba to blow up bridges, railroads, and oil refineries. In one notable incident, agents targeted the Matahambre copper mine, a vital economic asset. Explosives were smuggled in, and while some missions succeeded in causing disruptions, many failed due to tight Cuban security, such as contaminating sugar exports, Cuba's main cash crop, with unpalatable chemicals to damage its international trade. No discussion of Operation Mongoose will be complete without addressing the assassination plots against Fidel Castro. They were among the most outlandish and unethical aspects of the operation. The CIA, under Harvey's direction, collaborated with mafia figures like Johnny Roselli, Sam Giancana, and Santos Trafficante, who had grudges against Castro for shutting down their Havana operations. Early plots in 1960 predated Mongoose but folded into it. Involved poisoning Castro's food or cigars with botulinum toxin. One plan called for placing explosive seashells in Castro's favorite diving spots, hoping he would pick one up. Other ideas bordered on the absurd. The CIA considered a depletatory chemical to make Castro's iconic beard fall out, believing it would undermine his macho image. There was a proposal for a poison wetsuit dusted with tuberculosis bacteria and a fungal spore. Another involved hallucinogens like LSD to be sprayed in Castro's broadcasting studio, caused him to rant incoherently on air. A pen rigged with a hyperbaric needle filled with poison was offered to a Cuban official, but the plot fizzled. In total, the Church Committee investigations in the 1970s revealed at least 8 CIA-backed assassination attempts on Castro between 1960 and 1965, any tied to Mongoose. Despite the creativity, none succeeded. Castro's security was formidable, and he seemed to have a sixth sense for danger, surviving over 600 attempts throughout his life with his own count. These plots raised ethical questions about U.S. foreign policy, blurring the line between defense and state-sponsored murder. Cornerstone of Mongoose was building an intelligence network inside Cuba. CIA recruited assets through Amtorid, a program that inserted agents via boat or submarine. These spies gathered data on military installations, troop movements, and economic conditions. One success was the identification of Soviet missile sites, which played a role in the lead-up to the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. However, infiltration was risky. Many agents were captured and executed. The operation also involved training Cuban exiles in infantry tactics, as the CIA realized earlier efforts like the Bay of Pigs lacked proper preparation. By mid-1962, plans included creating resistance cells that could spark an internal revolt, potentially supported by a U.S. military intervention if needed. Operation Mongoose reached its zenith in Nadir during the Cuban Missile Crisis. In October 1962, U.S. reconnaissance flights discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba, bringing the world to the brink of nuclear war. Kennedy imposed a naval blockade and tense negotiations ensued. Unbeknownst to the public, Mongoose activities continued amid the crisis, with sabotage teams ready to strike. Lansdale proposed accelerating operations, including mining harbors and attacking missile sites. However, Kennedy, wary of escalating the situation, scaled back. The crisis resolved when Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev agreed to remove the missiles in exchange for a U.S. pledge not to invade Cuba and the secret removal of American missiles from Turkey. The crisis exposed Mongoose's limitations. Castro's regime was more entrenched than anticipated. Bolstered by Soviet support, internal assessments know that while sabotage caused some economic damage, estimated about $100 million, it failed to incite widespread rebellion. Cuban morale remained high, and security forces effectively neutralized threats. Post-crisis, Operation Mongoose entered Phase 2, but with reduced enthusiasm. Lansdale's October 1962 report aimed for a revolt by year's end, but this was overly optimistic. The SGA debated more aggressive actions, including direct U.S. involvement, but Kennedy shifted towards diplomacy, exploring back channels for normalization. By 1963, Mongoose was quietly dismantled. Assassination plots continued sporadically, but the operation's formal structure ended. Kennedy's assassination in November 1963 further shifted priorities. Under President Lyndon B. Johnson, U.S. focus turned to Vietnam, and Cuba policy evolved into a long-term embargo. Operation Mongoose's legacy is one of ambition and failure. It highlighted the lengths to which the U.S. would go to combat communism, including morally dubious tactics. The operation cost millions, involved thousands, and strained international relations. Yet Castro remained in power until 2008. Declassified documents from the National Security Archive and State Department reveal internal debates. For example, in a 1962 memo from Lansdale outlined cautious goals for Phase 1, emphasizing quiet sabotage to avoid provoking war. CIA reports detailed recruitment efforts, such as requesting 38 military trainers for Cuban exiles. Critics argue Mongoose exemplified imperial overreach, pushing Cuba closer to the Soviets and justifying Castro's paranoia. It also set precedents for later covert operations, like those in Chile or Iran. The Church Committee's 1975 expose led to reforms, banning executive assassinations, really. In retrospect, Mongoose underscores the perils of covert action without clear objectives or exit strategies. It reminds us that the regime change is rarely simple, especially against resilient adversaries. As we conclude this exploration Operation Mongoose, reflect on how Cold War fears drove extraordinary measures, from propaganda leaflets to exploding cigars. This operation blended ingenuity with desperation. Though it failed, it shaped U.S.-Cuba relations for decades. What do y'all think on that one? Amazing how close we were to for me not possibly not even being here. Who knows what would have happened? If we actually went to war with the Soviet Union back in the '60s, I might not be here right now. So you never know. Things make you go for sure. But I hope y'all enjoy this one. Please like and share. Make sure you check out the links in the description for the Troubled Minds Radio Network and for the merch. Y'all pick up a shirt, pick up a hat. Got lots of cool stuff if you want to check it out. But the main thing is make sure you subscribe. It's free, and it's a way to support the channel and help get more and more people seeing it. So appreciate y'all. As always, y'all keep on keeping on. And the peace and the chicken grease. Y'all be good.